booties for black girl nerds.
Thank you both for your time. Beginning with you, Zoe, each version of the relationship between Batman and Catwoman has had its own kind of chemistry, some more playful, some more sexual, some, just different variations. How would you describe this version of the Bat and the Cat relationship with each other?
I think it's definitely the most emotional version that we've seen before. I think, of course, there's chemistry and there's attraction and all of that, but, we're both, incredibly wounded people. And so I think to watch two people who aren't used to having this kind of connection, this emotional connection, and to watch that challenge each other, I think it's a really interesting place to start this journey.
Absolutely. With Rob Ober, for you, the vision of the script in the film has been very clear by the director. I had the pleasure of joining you guys for the screening at the lot, and it was a very, very clear vision. And for you, when you agreed to take on the part and what you formed in your head, how did that change as you began filming the way you wanted to convey Batman from when you agreed to when you actually started?
I mean, I guess the way you approach every single part, you kind of break down each individual facet of the script and the character, and you kind of break it down to such small parts you can no longer really see the big picture. And it's just astonishing to me when we saw it the other day, how close Matt's vision is to what the original script was, and it just kind of blows my mind. It blows my mind how the level of concentration to. He'd obviously seen the movie in his head that he wanted to make before he even shot one frame of it. And we were talking to the producer the other day, and he was saying, the way Matt writes scripts, they're basically like storyboards. And so it's an unusual type of script to read because you can't, it's really inside Matt's head. But yeah, he was so open to kind of questioning and stuff. I mean, the amount of times when, if we didn't understand something, he would still just allow us to explore it, and then we do 10 takes of our version. He's like,
let's just try one the way I see it.
Let's just do it the way I see it. Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, you were right.
But egoless, absolutely egoless, yeah. Matt. It's
I realized after about a month, I'm just going to do it your way.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing.
Lastly, Zoe, is that a comforting place? Because, there's always stereotypes of directors and writers that they're all over the place and they haven't honed in on what they want it to be. With it being so clear and he having this whole film in his head, how is that for you as a performer to work in a space where it's really clear?
Oh my goodness, it was an absolute gift, having a director who cares as much as Matt does, who wrote the script, so he's absolutely connected to these characters on a very emotional level. And honestly, it was the thing that brought me the most comfort when I would start to panic about, choices I was making or the fact that I have this role at all. I would think to myself, Matt has really good taste, and I have to remember that I really believe that, and it brought me great, great comfort that I just think he's a master filmmaker.
I agree. He has excellent taste. You guys were wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful premiere. Thank you for speaking with me.
Thanks so much. Cheers.
Thank you. Colin, I loved After Yang. I wanted to talk to you guys about I wanted to ask you guys something different than you already asked. So instead, I'm going to start with John. You guys have spent so much time together. When you first saw Colin in the whole makeup, how did you react to seeing him in the whole getup as the Penguin?
I didn't know it was him. I did not know it was him. We hadn't spent a lot of time together. A lot of times you don't work on the same day, and I kept looking around, and then when it was, I couldn't believe it was him. And when you looked really up close, it would just look like this guy that he inhabited, and he inhabited it really, fully. And so it was interesting having conversations between takes, that we chatted a little bit. So in a way, I think the collaboration that he had with Mike, the makeup artist, is sort of what an actor fantasizes about. Like, you always think, well, I'm going to look this way and I'm going to change so much. And of course, then you have to deal with your own body and face and, hair. And so it was sort of fascinating. And also, how his character reacted, to my character. But initially I was just flabbergasted. I mean, that's really the truth.
I was blown away myself. I'm sure you've heard that many times today, Colin. When you think of characters that you've enjoyed over the years that were antagonists, protagonists, played in the gray, when you look at John's portrayal of Carmine, what does he have in common with those characters that you've enjoyed throughout your career when you look at his performance and what he brought to Carmine Falcone?
I remember Joel Schumacher, an old and dear friend of mine who I have so much to be grateful for. Joel Schumacher saying to me when I did my first film over this side of the pond, Tigerland, saying, you always have to have a secret. You always have to have a secret. And I don't know that that's true with every character. I don't think there's anything that's universal to all characters, but Carmine, John's character, has some secrets, There are things he knows that he's not sharing with people. And there's a kind of a self-possession that comes with that. So his self-possession and his ease, the old thing about the toughest guy in the room is the quietest guy. It's that kind of stuff as well, that the mythology of the Carmine Falcone character, the mythology does a lot of the work for him. He has been involved in acts of violence. He has committed acts of violence. I don't know how long it's been since he has. He has people commit acts of violence for him. All these things, there is this lore around him. And the way John just carried that in a seemingly nonchalant way, charming, how he was with Bruce on the steps that day when they have that scene and he recounts to Bruce that profound experience he had with Bruce's father all those years ago. There was such a level of gentility and intimacy with that. It was kind of terrifying because it was all behind these kind of smoky glasses where you couldn't really see what was going on. So it was great to be around, man. It was great to work off that, and it put me in my place. I'm not at a place, Oz, where I could challenge that kind of power. I wish I was. I have dreams of it. But at this stage in the story, I'm not in a place where I can challenge that kind of power. So it doesn't take much for these guys to feel vulnerable. These guys who exist in these worlds, in the worlds of criminality, they're incredibly vulnerable. They're even more vulnerable than the majority of us because they're always watching over their shoulder and they know that the power differential is always at play,
And lastly, John, just a quick one. What will you be doing on premiere night? People are super excited. I tweeted something and my Twitter went crazy. So what will you be doing on premiere day?
I guess there's a premiere in New York that we're going to go to. So, I would like to see it with a regular audience, slip in the back and see what their response is. That's always interesting. Not, an audience of invited people. You get really the real sort of reaction to something.
Are you going to do it, man? Are you going to?
Yeah,
I
do that. I like to slip
Yeah.
in the back and see it because I feel like, well, that's kind of why you do it.
That's
right?
the truth. Yeah, totally.
And to see that, yeah.
I might
Well,
do it.
I enjoyed it. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. I appreciate
you.
it. Have a wonderful
Thank you.
premiere. Thank you so
All the
much.
best.
Lovely day. Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. Jeffrey, I'll begin with you. James Gordon is a historical character that always wavered on the path of righteousness. Every person who's portrayed him has had their own cadence, decision making that they made for the part. How did this walk of righteousness inform how you wanted to portray him, that he's always had throughout history?
Well, I relied on Matt's script, of course. That was the blueprint for everything that we did, and it was so detailed, comprehensive, and so clear in conveying his vision. But as well, I went back and looked at the comics. I started in 1939. The first panel of the first Batman comic is Gordon and Bruce Wayne, and I kind of skipped my way into the contemporary stuff. And what I found in the contemporary stuff that was really wonderful, and some of it was, yes, Gordon is honorable, and he's doing what he feels and doing what is generally perceived as best for the citizens of Gotham. But he's also, there's stuff inside as well that's that's less than perfect. And he isn't omnipotent. You know, he's got vulnerabilities. He's overwhelmed. But it was those elements, I think, that at least internally, I kind of tried to maintain, because otherwise, to see someone who's just like, you know, strident and doing the right thing and, you know, straight as, and, you know, a razor's edge is maybe, I think, doesn't do service to the type of film that Matt's making, which is much more nuanced. And so I just tried to follow the tone, and hopefully some of that comes through, the tone, the overall tone, but hopefully some of that comes through as well.
Absolutely. We don't get too many law enforcement characters that don't play in the gray to a certain extent. So I like your explanation for that. For Paul, for you, something that always kind of directs the fear level that I have, or just how I react to characters, is their cadence. And I was really intrigued by the cadence that you used for Edward. And it was very intentional. When you were getting ready, when you agreed to this part, how did what you had formulated in your mind of who he was change from that point of agreeing and knowing the role to actually getting on set and performing the role with other people?
Well, firstly, I liked the word you used earlier, righteous, with Gordon. But I think all these characters are sort of righteous in their convictions, and which I think is interesting. So you'd think you would have this big impression that you're carrying of what the Riddler might be, but as soon as I read Matt's script, that was kind of blown out of the water, because his point of view was so singular, and his take on the character was. So that was there on the page. So it was starting from scratch in some ways. Of course, I want to carry the history, the iconography, the archetypal power of the comics and the Riddler and all that. But we were also starting with something new. I think it was clear from the get-go that making this character sort of as real as possible, or maybe just making his emotional life as real as possible, for me was maybe going to be the key to him being scary, and the contact with reality that character has is I think really powerful. So it did constantly evolve, and anything to do with cadence or speed, none of that could have been there from the beginning. It actually took quite a while to build the character, because you have to put away the things you thought, and then it was really about his past and then what that mask allows him to now be.
Well, I thank you, gentlemen. I loved how you both modernized these roles. It was very entertaining. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Better shake your booties for black girl nerds. Better shake your booties for black girl nerds.